and welcome. You're watching Newsx with me, Devika Chopra. The Indian government has informed the Delhi High Court that a 33-year-old woman, Shahzadi Khan from Uttar Pradesh, who had been on death row in the UAE, was executed on the 15th of February in the Gulf nation. Shahzadi Khan was prosecuted for the death of a 4-month-old child under her care. She was employed as a caregiver in Abu Dhabi when the incident occurred in December 2022. The child died after receiving routine vaccinations, and Shahzadi was accused of causing the death. Ministry of External Affairs appraised the court of the execution after Shahzadi's father approached the Delhi High Court seeking a directive to the government to issue a bulletin and ascertain information regarding her condition. According to the government, her burial is scheduled for the 5th of March. As the father of Shahzadi Khan continues to claim that the government did not provide any support, the question truly arises is, why was India not informed? How is it that India was informed 12 days after the execution? Was Shahzadi Khan even provided the legal aid that she deserved? Her family at the moment claims that her confession was taken through pressure and torture. I take this conversation forward. I have with me Ambassador Shahzadi Mukherjee. We also have with us Major General Sudhakarji, defense expert, and Dr. Amitabh Singh, Associate Professor of Russian and Central Asian Studies at JNU. Let me begin this conversation with Major General Sudhakarji. Major General Sudhakarji, I want to understand, sir, can we... Okay, all right. We have Ambassador Shahzadi Mukherjee with us as well. Ambassador Shahzadi Mukherjee, if you can hear me. Ambassador Shahzadi Mukherjee, I want to understand from you, ma'am, are there any international laws or laws between two nations that have been violated by the UAE in not informing India of the fact that an Indian national who was on death row has in fact been executed?
There is no such bilateral rule, but common courtesy and bilateral relations between two friendly countries should ensure that such tragic news should be immediately transmitted to the country concerned, especially because I recall having done 2 shows earlier on your channel where we were discussing how this unfortunate lady could be saved. And one way of doing so was to pay what is called in these nations payment of blood money. In other words, there are negotiations done between those who consider themselves to be the victim and the person who is considered to be the perpetrator, and the negotiations are done between neutral parties for payment of money to compensate for the so-called crime. And if that is accepted, then the person is set free immediately. This rule or law, I should say, Quranic law, applies across the Middle East. And many efforts were made by the Indian embassy with an independent lawyer who was appointed to try and save her life. So it was really unfortunate that when she was allowed to make the last phone call, the embassy clearly was not informed, and the family also clearly did not inform the local authorities, who could have informed the embassy so that some last ditch efforts could have been made to save her life. So all in all, it is a very great tragedy, particularly because it would appear that she had been framed. The child died because he was given vaccinations to which he reacted, but because she was a woman from another country, virtually held hostage by the family because she had gone for some medical treatment, but she was forced into domestic labor, and she was immediately arrested and then given the death penalty because in that country, like in many countries, the law is very harsh on perceived murderers of infants, of children. They are, at least in the Middle East, they are immediately given the death penalty. But the payment of blood money has got off many people. It's called payment of blood money. That's money in compensation for the blood that has been spilled. That's the way it's written in the Quran. But clearly in this case, it did not work. Devika.
Okay, Major Sudhakarji, I want to understand from your perspective as well. Is there any sort of protest that India could raise at this point in time, now that the execution has already taken place? Because it's extremely strange, as Ambassador Mukherjee also pointed out, there may not be any bilateral rule or any international rule per se. However, out of common courtesy, the country ought to have been informed, especially when the family of Shahzadi Khan continues to claim that her confession in this particular case was taken under pressure, was taken under duress and turmoil.
Absolutely. Devika, firstly, good evening. Thank you for getting me to your show, and compliments to very distinguished and esteemed co-panelists. And in fact, Ambassador Ma'am deserves to have the last say. She's an authority on many subjects, but this issue willy-nilly is predominated by a diplomatic paradigm. And I personally feel I've been a president of a multinational company in Middle East, myself and a CEO. There are many gaps, Devika, many gaps. I think since we have almost close to more than 8 million Indian diaspora in the Middle East, I think the government needs to take this as a wake-up call. And as regards the questions which you are asking, it's yes, the answer is it's very disturbing. A few months back, in fact, Ambassador Ma'am and myself, we are in your channel only. We are discussing as to how best protection can be extended to girl from Kerala in Yemen. And we are talking of taking help of the Houthis through Iran, and it was dismissed. I don't know, it has not come to the limelight what happened. Death sentence had been awarded to her, and what is the last outcome, I don't know. But my friends sometime back who were in touch with me, they said that it's a success story. They have been able to intervene, timely intervention, and she has been protected from that the gallows, otherwise she was going to be hanged. I don't know whether it is true or not. But what I'm coming to is, I think the international law needs to take cognizance of these kind of things. Even if it doesn't, let India take it as a kind of a precedent. Let's start a system wherein almost 50% of the forex reserve remittances are coming from Middle East. If they are actually enabling our wealth to flow into the country has got a moral responsibility to take care of the safety and our being. So it's not there, Devika, unfortunately. I have seen in my own company also, there are a lot of Indians coming. They are not regulated by any kind of rules, regulation. They have some temporary provision. They come under the work schedule. There are vendors who collect them from India, take them out there. So these are not streamlined, internationally recognized methodology which they follow. So as of now, if I have to recommend something, firstly, the case is very disturbing. It should not happen. And let it be taken as a case in point to prevent occurrence of such kind of death sentences or executions in future. And third and most important thing is, we need to nip the problem in the bud. Nipping the problem in the bud, I think when the child was vaccinated and it reacted, and that was the cause of death, well, what was the redressal mechanism that the Indian diaspora, which was there in the Middle East, took recourse to? If that could be taken as a start point of the response mechanism, perhaps some beginning could have been made towards a very progressive and solution-finding approach. Back to you, Devika.
Right, absolutely. Let me on that note also bring in Dr. Amitabh Singh into the conversation. Dr. Amitabh Singh, the case that Ambassador Mukherjee and Major Sudhakarji are referring to is the Nimisha Priya case, a nurse from Kerala who is currently on death row in Yemen, and we have discussed that case earlier as well, wherein her pleas, several of her pleas have been rejected by the Yemen Supreme Court, and there is some conversation about blood money vis-a-vis the Houthis that also goes on, but ultimately it boils down to this, that several people from India end up going to the Middle East in search for work. Nimisha Priya went as a nurse, and Shahzadi Khan went as a caretaker, or someone who wanted to work in perhaps someone's home, and that's the role that she was given there as well. However, in case some unfortunate or untoward incident is to arise, it seems as though our own people, Indian nationals, find themselves completely stuck in that country with no recourse whatsoever, because they don't have the same legal systems as we do. It's strange that currently we're talking about how a woman was how an Indian national who was working in the UAE on a work visa was executed by the country, and India was informed 15 days later. Just 20 minutes back, I was having a conversation about how Christian Michel, who is one of the accused in the Augusta Westland case, the middleman, has been granted bail by our courts, because the courts say that there is something lacking with the investigation agencies that have not been able to collect evidence against him. So we can't actually keep him incarcerated till the timing the trial is over. So we're looking at completely different justice systems and legal systems. So what is it that we now need to do from an intergovernmental level, but also as some sort of an education to people who are choosing the Middle East to go and work there, that if something were to happen, it is quite possible that you will be falsely implicated.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. There are 2 or 3 things involved here. The first is that this lady who went to UAE as a caregiver was taken to Dubai under a false premise that she was supposed to be there for a treatment because her face was burnt in some accident a few years back, and she was looking for a job so that she can actually help her family also and look after her a plastic surgery kind of thing there also. So the first thing, that there are caregivers in West Asia from India in large numbers. If you go to Israel, you will find that every third caregiver in an Israeli family is an Indian, especially from Kerala and Andhra Pradesh. Now, in this case, this lady who went there was taken. The agent who took her on a very false premise that she'll be there only for 60 days, and later she discovered that she was there for 6 months. In the meanwhile, what happened was that this lady was attending to a newborn child, 4.5 years old child, who, the uncle of that boy who had taken her there was actually not attending to what her requirements were. For example, she was not paid salary. In one of the reports which I read from a very reputed news magazine, it says that she was held as a captive there. She was not allowed to interact, and when the child died, they made her confess on video and gave her to authorities. Now the authorities immediately arrested her, as the laws there are, and she was put into a jail, and the legal procedure started. The Indian embassy there failed to respond. That's what my reading is. Because this execution was supposed to take place in May 2024. Because of the floods and many other things, this could not happen. And again, after that, there was some royal mourning, again, in which this lady was not executed. So from May to February 15, there was a lack of communication or a communication gap between the External Affairs Ministry or the embassy in Dubai, in UAE, and the local government there. So the 2 things that are related here is how, under what conditions Indians are taken as workers there, the first thing. And this is rampant everywhere. You will find that this has been happening, that they are taken in as a plumber, but they end up doing masonry work there, and their passports and visas are kept by the employers there, and they are not given their salaries in time. There have been n number of cases. And there are, there are authorities which are authorized to attend to all these complaints. Somehow they fail to respond, or the response is not as good as expected by these people. So here the primary problem lies with how the communication has been with the accused, or the lady who was on a death sentence. The finally, what I would like to suggest is that the state, the Indian government, the Indian embassy, and I'm sure they must be doing that, must maintain the whereabouts of people who are going. For example, in this case, this lady went for 6 months. I mean, she went in December 21 for 6 months, and she was supposed to be there by May. After that, there was no communication from embassy either in India or the government from there, that where she has gone, and there was no communication between the family and the lady also. So there are various gaps, and even after death sentence that was executed on 15th February, the authorities informed Indian authorities after 12 days of the execution, which is a clear case of a lack of communication. We maintain an excellent relations with most of the West Asian states, especially with Dubai, where we have a large diaspora, large working population which works there, and it should be seen as a red flag when it comes to how we accommodate our people there. And because, apart from the money that they send back to India, the best part is that these states are very cognizant of India's concerns when it comes to Indians. We have seen that in the case of Qatar, where 9 of our former Navy personnel were released, and Dubai also has a tradition of having very good relations with India. So this needs to be addressed and should be taken care by authorities. And above all, you must have noticed that this case was brought into notice by the courts and not by the Ministry of External Affairs or the embassy there. So there is some communication gap. Some things needs to be addressed. There should be a
Yes.
proper inquiry on why this has happened and what remedies could be taken.
Okay, Ambassador Mukherjee, I'll leave the last word with you. We have a few minutes left, but I want to understand from your perspective as well. Like I said, there are several Indians who now want to explore employment opportunities in the Middle East, but it's one case after the other that continues to prop up, wherein we see that employers take people on false promises, their passports are confiscated, they're not paid salaries. How do we fix this matter with countries that we genuinely do have good bilateral relations with? India-UAE relations are quite good at this point in time, but something of this sort to happen, some action has to be taken or some protest has to be raised by India.
Well, let me first reassure Dr. Singh, who was raising some doubts about MEA and the Indian embassy there, that in fact we have a separate wing exclusively to look after such cases. Precisely because, as he correctly pointed out, we have a huge Indian diaspora all over the Middle East and a very large number in both Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And we have a separate consul general in Dubai and an ambassador in Abu Dhabi. And we have excellent relations with the local government. In this particular case, apart from the fact that there are unscrupulous dealers who exploit helpless people, especially women, to try and traffic them into these conditions, which is really unfortunate, a little bit like the infamous donkey route. In this particular case, I understand that she got trapped in a situation which became aggravated when the death of the child was put on her, and the route that is followed thereafter is strictly according to Quranic law. There's not a question of bilateral relations or interfering, etc. That Quranic law demands payment of blood money, which is done through negotiation. The embassy hired a local lawyer and an Indian lawyer. The embassy was in continuous touch with the lady and with the government. The embassy also raised funds. There were diaspora who contributed funds for the blood money. But unfortunately, the agreement could not be reached. It broke down, I understand, at the last moment about the amount to be paid, and before there could be recommencement of negotiations, this poor woman was asked, what is your last wish? Which she did was to call up her parents, and they had this last conversation, and she was executed thereafter. Given the huge number of Indians across in Qatar, in UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain,
Yes.
we have to crack down on these unscrupulous agents. That has to be done here in India. We have to make sure that people are not trapped or lured into these routes. And on the other hand, I can assure you that every single Indian embassy in these areas have special wings and special people to deal with such cases. Despite the large number of cases, we have usually managed to get them off. As General Sudhakarji was saying, I also had heard that that woman, that person in Yemen has been saved. So, in fact, I was quite confident when I had been reading about this case that with the payment of blood money, because that's the way it's done, she would get off, and then they are actually liberated. They're allowed to go back to the country of origin. So it is a real tragedy. There are many lessons to be learned from it, but certainly it is very unfortunate that the information came so late, and an inquiry should be made with the UAE government, both there and here, as to why this vital information was not given to us earlier.
Yes.
And I do hope that now we would be able to bring her body back for the last rites here, etc., so that at least the family has the compensation, whatever little, of being able to do their little bit for the departed soul. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I've completely run out of time, but I thank all of our panelists for joining us on the broadcast. With that, viewers, we sip into a very quick break.